talk a little bit more about leadership.
We didn't have any.
I can honestly leave the room at this time.
Yeah, well, why don't we ask Kenny to leave the room?
Well, that's okay, well, we'll say it to his face.
No, we would just say
Let's
it.
just talk about every time the captain come along with a new piece of music. What was
That's
likely to
right.
happen?
It was very, very democratic. McCrimmon would pass the garbage can, and if there was any music left on the table, we played it. If there wasn't, sorry, Ken, not this time.
Well,
So-
I remember farewell to Dave.
Farewell,
Yeah.
yeah.
Made it all the way to the men's room to be used.
Well, that's where Kenny played it the best.
Yeah,
It's a good thing the captain.
You've asked the wrong
Thanks
question
for
now.
yeah.
So, but what about that? I mean, you know, Kenny was pipe major for a long time, and
But
was,
he knew his place, and that was why we loved him.
Yeah, he was the undisputed leader, but it
That's
was
right.
very, very democratic.
democratic
Round the
music
table,
taste.
do we want to do this or don't we?
Yeah.
And it was,
Totally
bring on 15 jigs, and we'd all settle on 2 or 3.
Right.
That's how it worked.
Yeah, it was not,
Mostly it was abilities to play them musically enough to get out of the tune that you wanted.
right.
And then the drummers would say, you're not gonna play that one, are you?
Yeah.
So it left you with 1 or 2 others to kind of fit into medleys.
Well, what about the personality of the band? Do you think it trickled down directly from Kenny and you know, the Kirkwoods? Like, was
Well,
it,
I know what I
or was it-
certainly felt was that every time I came to practice or every time I played, it was not just a matter of letting the pipe major down, but you're letting the band down if you weren't prepared, if you didn't know the music.
Sure.
So again, that fraternity, that very close-knit group, that's who you were trying to do your best for.
Mhm.
And I think, Captain, that was probably your leadership, your style, your guidance, that's what you brought out in the band, that this is, it's a group of individuals becoming one, and when you don't do your job, it becomes a group of individuals.
Yeah, and maybe no coincidence, you know, there weren't a lot of, you know, with the pipers anyway, a lot of top guys who are pushing it, the solos all the time. They could have.
Well, no, there certainly wasn't this competitive
the
nature
focus.
between the players at all. The other thing on that, the administration of the band was really patterned after some of the good bands in Scotland, Shots in particular. If you'd had been to a Shots practice back in the 70s, you'd have the committee sitting up on the stage at the back. There'd be old Tom, and there'd be Tom Wilson, and you know, and they were just quietly overseeing all the business affairs of the band. And we were very fortunate. We had a committee structure almost the same with parents of players in the band. Ken Anderson was our long-standing president, and he was the father of Neil Anderson, who plays with the Ottawa Police right now. And every weekend, he'd be down with the coffee pot going. He'd make sure we were satisfied all the way through the practice. He never once interfered with the musical management of the band. My father was treasurer. In our first few years, we had Tommy Hills. These were people that outside the playing arena of the band itself.
Mhm.
And that really took all the administrative weight off the pipe major, lead drummer, and other members of the band. And it was very, very important. The other thing, we had a structure where there were several pipe sergeants over the years. I feel a pipe sergeant is a person that has a function in the band. It's not honorary. So each one had a specific function. And so we might have carried 3 pipe sergeants at any one time for exactly what they could offer to the band. So that spread the administration of the band around completely. So my only function was to, you know, coordinate the competitive effort and some of our performances as well. And opened a lot of criticism there, so as you've already heard.
Well said, Ken.
I'm telling you, it's off my chest, guys. I love you for it.
Well said.
So Bob, that sound about right to you, like the
Oh, absolutely.
pipe sergeant?
Yep, that's right. We just sort of found our place.
Mhm. Okay.
Going back to something Ken said, there was a lot of competitiveness in the band at practice. It's getting to practice, make sure your pipes are going, and if your pipes are singing, you made sure everybody knew it.
Right.
Because now you're the standard today, and
Yeah.
and it was competitive, like who got in the washroom first, and okay, what do we gotta do to get this going, guys? And what we used to do is, 1 or 2 guys would start playing together, and you would just kind of coagulate coming in as your pipes got going.
Yeah.
Well, McCrimmon, and I'm proud to say, was always one of the first out there. No, Bob's pipes were always, that was the gold standard.
Yeah. The setup was different back then too.
Yeah.
I relied on Bob constantly for all the years I had the band for his outstanding chanter sound and drone sound, and we never varied from that in our setup. And as pipe major, I didn't spend the time having people play to me. They played to Bob, and I could sit back and listen and sound-wise hear what his chanters were like. If I thought it was too sharp, I'd say, okay, flatten it off a shade and so on. So it worked. We had a good team working that way, and it was always a team.
Yep, that was never stressful.
So what about traveling to Scotland? You know, one of the first North American bands to kind of venture over and try, you know, compete against.
You guys went in
against the
66.
top.
Okay, the first trip, I think I'm the only one here that went on the first trip, and it started in '66. Flights were becoming available. In those days, you could charter planes, and that was a
Prop
big
jump.
thing. There was, well,
Prop
they
jump.
were prop planes. The flight took approximately 13 hours. We had to stop in Gander, Newfoundland for a refuel. So in '66, the city of Toronto went over, Worcester went over, and we went over. 3 bands. The Worlds was in June in those days, and rotated around, and it was up in Inverness. And that was quite a remarkable year, because that was the first year the North Americans had started to travel. And in all due respect to all the success the North American bands have had over the last few years, there was some great success back then. The city of Toronto were second in piping.
At the World.
At the Worlds. We all had to submit 3 MSRs, no medleys at that time. The judges were undercover. One of the judges, I still have the master sheet, one of the judges was Seamus McNeil, for example, and the other judge, I think, was John McClellan.
That's right.
And Caberfay got second in piping, and were overall 5th place in the world. So the Caberfay was the first North American band to gain a prize at the World Championship. To put it in perspective, Inver Gordon was playing at that time. Muirheads was right in the middle of their 5-year good run. Glasgow Police was going good at the time, so was
Edinburgh
Edinburgh
Police was
Yeah.
big time.
So this was big time competition. We ended up, if I can recall, the 10th, was it 10th? Yeah, it was a 10th place finish at that time, out of somewhere around 16 or 17 bands.
So outside of the judges, you know, they obviously accepted you, but like, what was the overall kind of atmosphere like with other bands? Were they happy to see you, or are they afraid?
It
or-
was the first year, actually, that the Canadian bands weren't prejudged. It was the very first year that happened. And prior to that, every band that had gone over from Canada was prejudged as to the grade they could go in.
Okay.
But that year, there was Worcester and Caberfay and the Clan that had gone over together, and they kind of went over there with an attitude saying like we're in grade 1, and that's it, you know, sort of thing. And they didn't prejudge the bands then. They let the band go into grade 1 that year, but it was the very first year that they weren't prejudged.
Because Wilson took the Argyles over earlier, in the earlier year. John
Okay,
Wilson from
right.
Toronto took the band over there, I guess, in the late 50s, earlier 60s.
I'm not sure, Pete, yeah.
And I believe they were noted as to what grade they were going to play.
Right.
But, you know, at any event, it was a successful trip over, an eye-opener, obviously. Our traveling companion back then was Willie Sinclair. He made our chanters, and we used him for the duration, more or less. And he was carving, setting us up, and what have you, throughout the whole trip. So he'd just finished a month-long stay here in Canada with us, you know.
So those trips, did you go over just for the Worlds, or was it more of a 2-week, 3-week kind of deal?
The first trip over was for 3 weeks, but we only played the Worlds, and there was more or less a holiday, so the members of the band and the family could experience what Scotland was all about. So for all of us, we were going over for the first time, so it's really...
You had to charter a plane at that time.
Yeah.
We chartered with British
I was the
Eagle.
guy that set up the charter at that time, but you had to charter the plane, and you had to give a certain stay, whatever, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever,
That's right.
you know, to allow the pricing, if you want, for lack of a better expression, but I think we went over there at that time for $225 a head.
Hmm.
And we chartered the plane, and for every so many seats, we got a free seat and so on, so it helped out the band cost as well.
Okay.
So it was, and that went on for a couple of years. And the people out of Detroit were chartering planes as well. You can't do it now.
And at that time, did you have some kind of game plan about, you know, we were gonna win the Worlds in a certain amount of time, or we're just gonna,
No.
what was the objective?
There wasn't one that I'm aware of.
It was a reward.
Yeah,
So
You know, we
exactly.
kind of talked to Jimmy for a year prior to that. You know, the band was doing quite well, and we had had this discussion as to, well, maybe there should be some way of, you know, rewarding the guys to some degree. And the reward was to go to Scotland the next year, but we didn't know the Cabernet was going and Worcester were going and so on. So
Really?
it was a bit of a reward to the band at that time, if I remember correctly.
There was no game plan whatsoever.
No game
No,
plan,
that's
no.
correct.
Go over and play.
Yeah, and that's it.
See what-
Experience it.
Just see what happens.
Yeah. Because, you know, realizing at that time, this was a new adventure. And so the whole idea of seeing how you matched up with the Scottish Pipe Band Association bands was new to us, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.